Although you usually see V-Trigger 2, Chun's VT1 is still viable and not worth covering in this series. So that means Nash is our next character, and his V-Trigger 2 is far and away worse than his V-Trigger 1. Nash's V-Trigger 2 is Stealth Dash. The activation dash is better than the post-activation dashes, but this usually only matters for dash stop combos. The activation dash is free, so it doesn't use up any V-timer. Know that only the dashes themselves consume V-timer and not the follow-ups. Each dash consumes half the timer, so counting the freebie on activation, you get a total of 3. It's possible to use 2 dashes in one combo, but generally it won't be worth it outside of kill scenarios. Even if you use the free dash from the activation itself, your combo will usually be heavily scaled, so you'll either use half the V-timer for average damage, or the whole timer for slightly better damage. Technically, you can use all 3 if you stop the first dash, but this is worth it in even less scenarios. The first attack is Justice Corridor. It's an overhead and leaps into the air, and it can be steered. It's +2 on block and OTGs. I won't waste time recording the OTGs that can be quick rise since you can't land them with any consistency. You can, however, get the OTG consistently after Crush Counter Sweep. If you're canceling into trigger, you have to deal with massive scaling due to the Crush Counter plus the activation. If you're already in trigger, you have to react to the Crush Counter. The second is easier because if you're already in trigger, you are probably canceling into a dash anyway to make yourself safe. Either way, this is more neat than practical. The second attack is Justice Shell. It resembles his flash kick from Alpha, so it's punishable on block as you'd expect. It allows follow-ups, and the grounded recovery can be cancelled into another stealth dash and followed up with Justice Corridor. This is the primary follow-up after activating. It's worth noting that the dashes and follow-ups have a ton of projectile invincibility, but it's not relevant to many of the points I'm going to make, so I might as well mention it here. As you can see, the primary use of this trigger is combo extension, so what makes it so bad? The short of it is that it's not all that bad. It just has bad synergy with Nash's kit, and more importantly, it's a 3-bar trigger on a character that relies heavily on his V-reversal to get back to neutral and escape the corner. Defensively, we're talking about a character with no 3-frame normal or invincible reversal outside of his super. If Nash V-reversals twice, he may not get to pop V-Trigger 2 where he likely would have had the option to pop V-Trigger 1. So the trade-off is having a trigger like V-Trigger 2 to increase damage on your combos and lock up close matches, but likely play losing matches without a V-Trigger because you had to V-reversal. There is actually a V-Trigger in the game that's very similar to Nash V-Trigger 2, and it's one of the strongest in the game at the time of recording, Seth VT1. Just like Nash VT2, Seth VT1 lets him extend his combos and score more damage on his opportunities. So what's the difference? Pretty much everything. Seth has an objectively stronger kit that allows him to find the hits more often, and his trigger allows him more than 3 uses. Not only that, but Seth has both a 3-frame normal and an invincible reversal, so he isn't giving up a major defensive option by saving his V-meter to pop trigger. Seth just gets to take advantage of this trigger because his kit is more complete and well-rounded, and it just does a better job of extending for big damage than Nash V-Trigger 2. I did my best to avoid talking about Nash's overall weaknesses in this video, but it has to be at least somewhat touched on. The problem with giving a character like Nash a trigger like this is that it doesn't solve any problems for him. Nash doesn't struggle versus projectiles, and getting good damage with VT1 isn't an issue because it scales less than every other trigger in the game. The problem is, his throw game is awful due to terrible walk speed, and he struggles to open the opponent up in a meaningful way. Making him hit harder doesn't help if he can't find the hit. This trigger can use some buffs, but unless the character himself also gets buffed, it's not going to help and won't be enough. As a proof of concept, a similar trigger to Nash VT2, being Cammy VT2, was buffed the very next patch after it was introduced into the game. Just like Stealth Dash, it gave Cammy a command dash and follow-ups. I won't get too far into this trigger as it's the subject of the next video in this series, but I wanted to point out that this trigger was buffed by making it 2 bars instead of 3, and I fully expected Nash VT2 to get the same buff, but it didn't, and it hasn't since. Neither trigger has seen relevant use, but this is more likely due to Nash's outdated kit and Cammy's powerful V-Trigger 1. I feel like this video has done all it can without turning into an entire piece about the meta of Street Fighter V, but that might be a good topic for the future. It's just hard to describe the struggles of a character like Nash without covering the overall meta, but I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I took polls on Reddit and Twitter asking what video I should make next, and after counting both, it looks like the next video will be on the myths of smurfing in Street Fighter V. After that, the next video in this series will be why nobody uses Cammy VT2, and after that, we'll have to see. Check out my other socials if you want to catch one of my streams when I go live, or just tag me in memes or ask questions. Thanks for watching.